My name is Celeste, 22 years old, and I'm sitting in my childhood bedroom on Christmas Eve, listening to laughter drift up from the living room below. The torn pieces of my scholarship rejection letter lie in the trash can. But that's not what's breaking my heart tonight. My parents just announced they're stopping my college tuition for my senior year. The reason I refuse to apologize to my younger brother for supposedly ruining his birthday party last week. Before we dive into this story of family betrayal and finding your own way, where are you watching from tonight? Please hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt unseen in your own family. Let's talk about what happens when the people who should protect you become the ones you need protection from. Growing up in suburban Ohio, our house looked perfect from the outside. My father worked as an accountant at a local firm, always wearing his pressed shirts and carrying his leather briefcase. My mother was a nurse at Cleveland General, working 12-hour shifts and coming home exhausted, but still managing to cook dinner most nights. We lived in a two-story colonial with a white picket fence, the kind of place where neighbors waved and kids played street hockey until the streetlights came on. Dylan came into the world 3 years after me, and from the moment he arrived, everything shifted. I remember being so excited to have a little brother. I'd picked out stuffed animals for him with my saved allowance money and practiced holding my baby doll so I could help Mom. But Dylan wasn't just any baby. He was their miracle child born after 2 miscarriages I only learned about years later. Mom would hold him for hours, just staring at his face like she couldn't believe he was real. As we grew older, the differences in how we were treated became impossible to ignore. When I was 8 and Dylan was 5, I spent weeks making a Mother's Day card with hand-drawn flowers and a poem I'd written myself. Dylan scribbled on a piece of paper 5 minutes before Mom came home. Guess which one ended up framed on the wall? When I asked why mine was tucked in a drawer, Mom said Dylan's was special because he was still learning to write. By middle school, I'd learned to excel quietly. Straight A's didn't get celebrated if Dylan brought home a C. My science fair win was briefly acknowledged before the conversation turned to how Dylan needed a tutor because school was harder for him. I started babysitting at 13, saving every dollar in a shoebox under my bed. When other kids were buying video games or makeup, I was calculating how much I'd need to pay for college applications. High school brought the divide into sharp focus. I worked 3 part-time jobs while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. Monday and Wednesday evenings at the library reshelving books until 9. Saturdays at the farmer's market selling produce from 4 in the morning until noon. Sunday afternoons tutoring middle schoolers in math. Every dollar went into my college fund. Meanwhile, Dylan quit the basketball team after 2 weeks because practice was too early. He dropped out of drama club because memorizing lines was boring. He spent his afternoons playing video games and his weekends at parties. My 16th birthday fell on a Saturday. I'd asked for nothing special, just dinner at home with the family. But that morning, Dylan woke up with what he claimed was a stomachache. Mom immediately canceled the dinner, saying we couldn't celebrate while Dylan was sick. I watched from my window as 2 hours later, Dylan miraculously recovered enough to go to his friend's house. They ordered pizza that night for him. I made myself a sandwich and ate it alone in my room. When graduation day arrived for my high school class, I was valedictorian. I'd practiced my speech for weeks, wanting to make my parents proud. As I stood at the podium scanning the crowd for their faces, my heart sank. The 2 seats I'd reserved for them were empty. They arrived 20 minutes late just as I was leaving the stage. Dylan had wanted to see a movie, and they'd lost track of time. Mom hugged me afterward and said they were sure the speech was lovely. The real blow came with college acceptances. Yale said yes. Yale University offered me a partial scholarship that covered 70% of tuition. I ran home that day, acceptance letter clutched in my hand, tears of joy streaming down my face. This was it, everything I'd worked for. Dad looked at the remaining 30% we'd need to cover and shook his head. Too expensive, he said. State school would be more practical. That same month, they bought Dylan a car for his 16th birthday. A $20,000 car for a kid who'd failed his driving test twice. I enrolled at Ohio State, close enough to commute some days to save on housing costs. I continued working now, juggling college courses with 25 hours a week at various jobs. Dylan, meanwhile, graduated high school by the skin of his teeth and enrolled in community college. He lasted 1 semester before dropping out, claiming college wasn't for him. My parents let him move back home, no questions asked, no rent required. The next year, Dylan decided he wanted to be a chef. My parents paid for culinary school, $8,000 for a program he quit after 3 months because the instructors were too demanding. Then it was photography. They bought him professional equipment, set up a studio space in the garage. That lasted 6 weeks. By 19, Dylan had burned through more money on his various phases than my entire college education would have cost at Yale. Through it all, Mom had her explanations ready. Dylan was sensitive, she'd say. He needed more support to find himself. He processed things differently. When I pointed out the unfairness, she'd get that hurt look in her eyes and ask why I couldn't be more understanding of my brother. Dad would just retreat behind his newspaper or suddenly remember work he needed to finish in his office. I learned to swallow my anger, to push down the hurt. I told myself it would be different once I graduated, once I was independent. Just 2 more years, I'd whisper to myself during late-night study sessions, running on 3 hours of sleep and gas station coffee. 2 more years, and I could build a life where my worth wasn't measured against Dylan's needs. But every family dinner was a reminder of where I stood. They'd ask Dylan about his day, his friends, his plans, while my Dean's List achievements got a brief nod. When Dylan got a part-time job at a record store and lasted a whole month, they threw a celebration dinner. When I got promoted to shift supervisor at the campus bookstore while maintaining my grades, it wasn't even mentioned. The worst part was how Dylan knew exactly what he was doing. He'd smirk at me across the dinner table when Mom praised him for basic adulting. He'd make snide comments about my uptight personality when I couldn't go out because I had to work. He'd borrow my things without asking, knowing our parents would tell me to share if I complained. $20 here, a textbook there, my laptop for a weekend. I started hiding everything valuable in a locked trunk in my closet. By my junior year of college, I was exhausted, but determined. 1 more year, I kept telling myself. 1 more year, and I'd graduate, get a real job, move out properly. I'd already started applying for positions in other cities like Chicago, New York, anywhere but Ohio. I dreamed of a tiny apartment where everything was mine, where no one could take my things or my peace, where my accomplishments belonged to me alone. That December, I came home for winter break with 2 suitcases and a stack of textbooks. Finals were in 3 weeks, and I needed to study constantly to maintain my GPA for the job applications. The house was decorated for Christmas lights twinkling on the tree Mom had put up the day after Thanksgiving. It should have felt warm, welcoming. Instead, I felt like a stranger walking into someone else's celebration. Dylan's presence already dominated the space under the tree, wrapped in expensive paper with elaborate bows. Mine, I knew from experience, would appear on Christmas Eve, usually practical things like socks or a gift card to the grocery store. December 20th was Dylan's 20th birthday. I'd been home for 3 days, spending most of my time holed up in my room with my corporate finance textbook and legal pads full of notes. The house had been buzzing with party preparation. Mom took the day off work to decorate hanging streamers and balloons like Dylan was turning 10, not 20. Dad picked up a custom cake from the expensive bakery downtown, the one that charged $70 for their special designs. Around 6 that evening, people started arriving. Not just a few friends, but what seemed like 30 people, maybe more. Dylan had invited everyone he knew, plus their friends, plus random people he'd met at bars. The music started reasonable, but quickly escalated to nightclub levels. Bass thumped through my bedroom floor, making my desk lamp vibrate. I put in earplugs and tried to focus on calculating net present values, but it was impossible. By 10 o'clock, the party had spiraled into full chaos. People were drunk, shouting over the music, spilling drinks on Mom's carpet. I could hear things breaking downstairs, glass shattering, followed by laughter. Someone was definitely smoking weed in the backyard because the smell drifted through my cracked window. I kept telling myself to stay calm, that it was just one night, that I could study at the library tomorrow. Then my bedroom door burst open. Dylan stood there swaying slightly, eyes glazed with alcohol. Behind him, 3 of his friends peered in, giggling like they'd discovered something hilarious. My room, apparently, was the evening's entertainment. Dylan pointed at me hunched over my desk and slurred that I was the reason he never brought girls home, that having such a boring, uptight sister was social suicide. I asked him to leave. Politely at first, then firmly. He laughed and walked straight to my bookshelf, running his fingers along my carefully organized textbooks. One of his friends picked up a framed photo of me with my study group, making crude comments about my appearance. Another sat on my bed with his beer, the condensation from the bottle leaving rings on my nightstand. When I stood up to physically escort them out, Dylan grabbed my laptop from the desk. He held it high above his head, doing a mock dance while his friends cheered. I reached for it, begging him to be careful, explaining I had weeks of work saved on there. He laughed and tossed it to one of his friends, who fumbled and dropped it. The screen cracked when it hit the hardwood floor. Then Dylan accidentally kicked my stack of handwritten notes, sending 20 pages of carefully organized study guides flying. His friends thought this was hilarious, stepping on the papers with their dirty shoes smearing mud and beer across my weeks of work. Something inside me snapped. Not broke, but snapped into place, like finding the missing piece of a puzzle I'd been trying to complete for 22 years. I walked downstairs, my footsteps steady, despite the rage burning in my chest. I went straight to the stereo system and yanked the plug from the wall. The sudden silence was deafening. 30 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me. My voice came out clear and strong, surprising even me. The party was over. Everyone needed to leave immediately. If they didn't, I would call the police about underage drinking and noise violations. Dylan came stumbling down the stairs, his face red with fury and embarrassment. He screamed that I had no right, that this was his birthday, that I was a jealous bitch who couldn't stand to see him happy. I stood my ground. I listed out loud everything he destroyed in my room, the cost of my laptop, the hours of work ruined. His friends started looking uncomfortable, some already heading for the door. Dylan's rage escalated. He threw a beer bottle against the wall, brown liquid exploding across Mom's white paint. He called me every name he could think of, accusations flying about how I'd always hated him, how I was trying to ruin his life. The remaining guests fled quickly after that, mumbling excuses and happy birthdays as they rushed out. Within 10 minutes, the house was empty except for family. Dylan was sobbing now, the angry, drunk tears of someone who'd never been told no. He ran to our parents' room, waking them from their sleep. I could hear him wailing his version of events, how I'd humiliated him, ruined his birthday, destroyed his friendships. Mom came down first, her robe tied tight, face creased with sleep and concern. She surveyed the destroyed living room, beer stains, broken glass, the hole in the wall where Dylan had thrown the bottle. Then she looked at me, and I saw it in her eyes. Somehow this would be my fault. Dad appeared behind her, taking in the scene with his accountant's calculating gaze. Dylan emerged from their room. Tears dried, a triumphant gleam in his eye. He knew exactly how this would play out. Mom's first words weren't asking if I was okay or why the house was destroyed. She asked why I had to ruin Dylan's special day. Why couldn't I have just stayed in my room? Why did I always have to make everything about me? I tried to explain about my laptop, my notes, the violation of my space. Dad picked up the broken laptop, examining it like it was evidence in a crime I'd committed. He said insurance might cover it, but the deductible would be expensive. The implication was clear, that this expense was somehow my responsibility. Mom was already getting the broom, muttering about the mess, the embarrassment, what the neighbors would think. Dylan sat on the couch playing the victim perfectly. He said all he wanted was one nice birthday, one night to celebrate with friends. He claimed I'd been giving him dirty looks all week, making him feel unwelcome in his own home. The lies flowed so easily, and our parents absorbed them like gospel truth. By the time he was done spinning his tale, I was the villain who deliberately sabotaged his party out of jealousy and spite. They wanted me to apologize. Right then, standing in the wreckage of Dylan's party, my broken laptop in Dad's hands, my semester's work destroyed. They wanted me to say I was sorry. Mom said it would be the mature thing to do. Dad said family meant sometimes swallowing your pride. Dylan sat there waiting, that familiar smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. I said no. One simple word, but it hung in the air like a challenge. I would not apologize for protecting my property, my education, my future. I would not say sorry for ending a party that was destroying our home. I would not bend anymore, not break anymore, not make myself smaller, so Dylan could feel bigger. The silence stretched out tension thick enough to choke on. Then Mom said the words that would echo in my mind for years to come. If I couldn't apologize, if I couldn't put family first, then maybe I needed to think about what kind of person I was becoming. Dad added that they were disappointed in my selfishness, my inability to show grace to my brother. I went to my room that night and looked at the destruction. The broken laptop, the ruined notes, the beer stains on my carpet. But more than that, I saw the metaphor for my entire life in that house. Everything I built got destroyed to make room for Dylan's needs. Every accomplishment got overshadowed by his failures that somehow needed more attention. Every boundary I set got crossed because keeping Dylan happy was more important than keeping me whole. Christmas Eve arrived 4 days later with fresh snow and family arriving from across the state. Grandma and Grandpa pulled up in their Buick at noon arms, full of presents and cookies. Aunt Janet and Uncle Bill came from Columbus with my cousins. Aunt Sarah drove in from Pittsburgh. The house filled with warmth and chatter, the smell of Mom's turkey in the oven, the sounds of Christmas music on the stereo. I helped in the kitchen, chopping vegetables and stirring gravy, playing the good daughter. No one mentioned the tension that had been suffocating the house for days. Dylan held court in the living room, regaling relatives with stories from college he'd never actually finished. Everyone laughed at his jokes, ruffled his hair, told him he'd grown so handsome. I watched from the kitchen doorway as Grandma slipped him a $100 bill, whispering that it was extra Christmas money for her special grandson. Dinner was served at 6, the dining room table extended with both leaves covered in Mom's best china. I sat between Cousin Amy and Aunt Janet picking at my turkey while conversation flowed around me. Dylan told the story of his birthday party, his version where friends came to celebrate, and everything was wonderful until his uptight sister caused a scene. The relatives made sympathetic noises, shooting me confused glances. As we were clearing dessert plates, Dad stood up, tapping his spoon against his wine glass. The room fell silent. He said he had an announcement to make, something important about family values and responsibility. My stomach dropped. I knew what was coming, could see it in the way Mom wouldn't meet my eyes, the way Dylan was practically vibrating with anticipation. Dad's voice was steady, authoritative, the voice he used for important client meetings. He explained that there had been an incident at Dylan's birthday party, that I had shown cruelty and disrespect to my brother. He said that after much discussion, he and Mom had decided consequences were necessary. Until I could offer a sincere public apology to Dylan for my behavior, they would be withdrawing financial support for my college education. The room went silent. Grandma's mouth fell open slightly. Uncle Bill shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Dad continued explaining that the money allocated for my final semester would instead go toward Dylan's art school tuition. He'd decided he wanted to be a graphic designer now, and the program started in January. Family meant supporting each other, Dad said, and I needed to learn that lesson. Mom finally spoke, her nurse voice calm and clinical. She was disappointed in my lack of empathy, my inability to see how much I'd hurt Dylan. She hoped this would teach me about priorities, about putting family first. She said it all like she was diagnosing a disease, something wrong with me that needed to be fixed. Aunt Janet cleared her throat, started to say something about this seeming extreme, but Dad cut her off. This was their decision as parents, what they felt was best for both their children. The message was clear, that no one else's opinion mattered. I looked around the table at these people who'd known me my whole life, who'd received my handmade Christmas cards, and watched me graduate with honors. Most looked away. Only Grandpa met my eyes, something sad and knowing in his gaze. Dylan spoke then, his voice dripping with false magnanimity. He said he was willing to forgive me, that if I apologized right now in front of everyone, he'd ask our parents to reconsider. He wanted to hear that I was sorry for ruining his birthday, for being a bad sister, for not supporting his dreams. The smirk was there, barely concealed. This was his moment of triumph, orchestrated perfectly. I stood up slowly, my napkin falling from my lap to the floor. Every eye in the room tracked my movement. My voice, when it came, was steady as Dad's had been. I said I would not apologize for something I didn't do wrong. I would not lie to make Dylan feel better about his own behavior. I would not sacrifice my truth for their comfort. If they wanted to take my education away, that was their choice, but it wouldn't make me bend. Mom's face flushed red. She said I was being dramatic, stubborn, that this was simple. Just say sorry, and everything could go back to normal. But I knew there was no normal to go back to. There never had been. Normal was me sacrificing everything while Dylan took and took and took. Normal was me being grateful for scraps while he feasted on attention and resources. Normal was killing me slowly, one compromised dream at a time. I excused myself from the table and walked upstairs. Behind me, the room exploded in hushed conversations, some relatives trying to mediate, others just wanting to escape the awkwardness. I heard Grandpa's voice louder than usual saying something about fairness, but it was drowned out by Mom's sharp response. Dylan's laughter floated up the stairs, victorious and cruel. In my room, I sat on my bed and looked around. 22 years of life in this space. Certificates and awards on the walls that no one had ever really celebrated. Pictures with high school friends who'd gone off to their own lives. A bookshelf full of knowledge I'd paid for myself. The broken laptop still on my desk, a reminder of how little any of it mattered to them. This room wasn't a sanctuary. It was a cell, and I'd just been handed a life sentence unless I was willing to lie. Through my window, I could see snow falling heavier now, covering the ground in fresh white. Somewhere out there was a world where I could be more than Dylan's disappointing sister, where my achievements could belong to me, where my worth wasn't measured against someone else's failings. The decision when it came felt less like a choice, and more like finally exhaling after holding my breath for 22 years. I started packing at midnight after the relatives had gone home, and my parents had retreated to their room. Dylan was in the basement playing video games with the volume turned up, gunfire, and explosions providing a soundtrack to my escape. I moved quietly, methodically, years of practice, being invisible, serving me well now. Into my old hiking backpack went the essentials. 3 pairs of jeans, 5 shirts, a week's worth of underwear. My warmest jacket, the one I'd bought secondhand, but was still waterproof. Every important document I had, including my birth certificate, social security card transcripts, bank statements. The $347 for my emergency fund, hidden in an old tampon box. My phone charger. My medications, the small jewelry box with Grandma's ring that she'd given me for my 18th birthday. I left the broken laptop but took the hard drive I'd managed to extract from it. Left the awards on the walls, but took the acceptance letter from Yale folded small in my wallet. Left the childhood photos, but took the one of me at my high school graduation, standing alone in my cap and gown, smiling despite everything. That girl deserved better than this house could give her. At my desk, I wrote the letter. Not an explanation or a justification, but a declaration. I listed every sacrifice I'd made, every job I'd worked, every achievement that had been overshadowed. I wrote about the 16-hour days, the meals skipped to save money, the scholarships I'd lost because I couldn't afford to take unpaid internships. I wrote about watching them spend $20,000 on Dylan's car while telling me Yale was too expensive. I wrote about the birthday dinners, canceled the graduations, missed the constant message that I mattered less. But I didn't write it with anger. I wrote it with the exhaustion of someone who'd finally stopped fighting a battle they were never meant to win. I told them I would finish college on my own terms, build a life on my own merit. I would not apologize for existing, for achieving, for refusing to make myself smaller. They could give Dylan everything now, without pretending it was about fairness. I wished them well with the family they'd always wanted, the one child they'd always preferred. The last line was simple. Please don't contact me until you're ready to see me, as I am not as Dylan's shadow. I left the letter on my perfectly made bed, the room cleaner than it had been in years. Everything in its place, everything in order, like the good daughter I'd tried so hard to be. Then I slipped out the back door into the snowing night, my breath forming clouds in the freezing air. The Greyhound station was 3 miles away, and I walked every step, my feet crunching in the fresh snow, each step taking me further from who they wanted me to be and closer to who I was. Emma answered on the second ring despite it being 2 in the morning. We'd been roommates freshman year before I'd moved back home to save money. She was in New York now, working as a graphic designer, living in a tiny apartment in Brooklyn. When I told her what happened, she didn't hesitate. Come here, she said. Her couch pulled out into a bed. Her building was hiring for a front desk position. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The bus ticket to New York cost $112, nearly a third of my money. I sat in the backpack clutched to my chest, watching Ohio disappear in the dark. A woman across the aisle was traveling with 3 kids, trying to keep them quiet and entertained. I gave her my pack of crackers and helped hold the baby while she got the other 2 settled. She smiled at me with such genuine gratitude that I had to look away before I started crying. As the sun rose somewhere over Pennsylvania, my phone started buzzing. 17 missed calls from Mom, 23 from Dad, 41 text messages ranging from anger to pleading to threats about my future. I read each one, then deleted them. Dylan had sent just one message, a photo of him in my empty room with the caption, "Finally got the space I needed." I blocked all 3 numbers and watched the sunrise paint the winter sky pink and gold. The Port Authority bus terminal in New York was overwhelming. People everywhere moving with purpose, everyone knowing exactly where they were going except me. I stood there for a moment, backpack heavy on my shoulders, $200 to my name. No family, no safety net, no backup plan. And for the first time in 22 years, I felt like I could breathe. The air tasted different when you weren't choking on someone else's expectations. Emma met me at the subway station in Brooklyn, wrapping me in a hug that smelled like paint and coffee. She didn't say it would be okay or that everything would work out. She just held me while I finally let myself cry, grieving not for what I'd left, but for what had never really existed. The family I'd wanted, the parents who saw me, the brother who could have been a friend instead of a competitor in a game I never wanted to play. Emma's apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up in Bushwick, 500 square feet, that she shared with a rotating cast of plants she couldn't keep alive. The couch was from a thrift store, bright orange and older than both of us, but it pulled out into a bed like she'd promised. She gave me a key on a paint-splattered keychain and told me this was home now for as long as I needed. The front desk job at her building was mind-numbing but perfect. 4 p.m. to midnight Tuesday through Saturday. $15 an hour under the table, paid in cash every Friday. I signed residents and accepted packages called maintenance for broken radiators and leaking pipes. During the quiet hours, I spread my salvaged textbooks on the desk and studied, determined to finish my degree, even if I had to do it online. Emma's friend Marcus managed a 24-hour diner near Union Square and needed weekend help. Friday and Saturday nights, midnight to 8 a.m., serving drunk college kids and exhausted medical residents. $20 an hour with tips that could double that on good nights. Sunday through Monday, I picked up shifts at a coffee shop that catered to the Wall Street crowd. 4 a.m. to noon, making triple shot espressos for people in $1,000 suits who never made eye contact. Sleep became a luxury I scheduled in 3-hour increments. I'd catch a few hours after the coffee shop before the front desk. A power nap between the desk job and the diner. Sundays after the coffee shop, I'd collapse on Emma's orange couch and sleep for 10 straight hours, my body finally giving out. Emma would cover me with a blanket and leave Chinese takeout in the fridge for when I woke up. The online courses were harder than in-person classes. No study groups, no office hours, just me and my salvaged hard drive, and whatever Wi-Fi I could steal. Corporate finance nearly broke me. I'd sit at the front desk at 2 a.m. calculating weighted average cost of capital, while residents stumbled in from their nights out. One regular Mrs. Chen from the 7th floor started bringing me tea during her insomnia walks. She'd been a professor once, she said. She recognized the look of someone fighting for their education. 3 weeks into my New York life, my phone rang with an Ohio number I didn't recognize. It was Grandpa. He'd gotten my number from Emma's Instagram somehow. He didn't lecture or plead. He just said he'd transferred $5,000 to my bank account. "For your education," he said. "Don't tell your parents." When I tried to thank him to explain, he cut me off. "You don't owe anyone an explanation for surviving Celeste. Just graduate." With Grandpa's money, I paid for my final semester up front. The relief was overwhelming. I could drop one of the diner shifts, get 4 hours of sleep instead of 3. I bought a refurbished laptop from a pawn shop, downloaded all my materials, set up a study schedule that would let me graduate on time. Every assignment submitted felt like a small victory, proof that I could do this alone. The diner became my favorite job despite the exhaustion. Marcus was a good boss, the kind who'd send you home with extra food and didn't care if you studied during the slow periods. The other servers were all hustling towards something like actors, writers, musicians, students. We covered each other's shifts without question, understanding that sometimes an audition or exam was worth more than a night's tips. There was a regular who came in every Friday at 3 a.m. David, early 40s, always ordered black coffee and wheat toast, always sat at the counter with architectural blueprints spread out. He owned a restaurant in the village. He told me one slow night. He was designing the expansion himself to save money. I mentioned I'd taken some business courses, and suddenly I was looking at his 5-year projections, suggesting adjustments to his cash flow models. By February, David was paying me to review his business plans. $50 an hour to go through his books, find inefficiencies, suggest improvements. He'd been an investment banker before he burnt out and bought the restaurant. He recognized something in my analysis, he said. The ability to see patterns, to find the story in the numbers. When I graduated, he promised he'd introduce me to people who could use those skills. March came with acceptance to 3 marketing firms for entry-level positions, all requiring me to start immediately after graduation, all offering salaries that seemed impossible after months of counting every dollar. I chose Brennan and Associates because they offered the most for professional development. They'd pay for additional certifications, maybe even an MBA eventually. The hiring manager said I had the kind of hunger they looked for, the drive that came from having everything to prove. 2 weeks before graduation, I got a call from Aunt Janet. She was in New York for a conference, wanted to meet for coffee. We sat in a Starbucks near Penn Station, while she told me what had happened after I left. The family had splintered. Grandpa refused to attend family dinners. Some aunts thought my parents had gone too far. Others said I was selfish. Dylan had started his graphic design program but was already complaining about the workload. Your parents look older, she said, tired, but still convinced they'd done the right thing. She asked if I wanted to send a message. I thought about it while my coffee went cold. Tell them I graduated, I finally said, with honors. Tell them I have a job, an apartment, a life. Tell them I'm okay, but don't tell them where I am or how to reach me. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She hugged me when we parted, slipped an envelope in my pocket. Inside was a graduation card signed by all the relatives who'd wanted to reach out but didn't know how, and a check for $2,000 labeled graduation gift from people who actually celebrated my achievements. Graduation day came in May. Emma took the day off to be my cheering section. We couldn't afford to fly to Ohio for the ceremony, so we watched the virtual stream on her laptop drinking champagne when they called my name for cum laude honors. That night, Marcus closed the diner early and threw me a party. My New York family, the people who'd seen me at my lowest and helped me climb out. David made a toast about resilience and grit. Mrs. Chen brought a cake she'd made herself. The overnight security guard from the building gave me a card signed by all the residents who'd watched me study at that front desk for months. I started at Brennan and Associates the next Monday. The salary was $47,000, which felt like a fortune after living on tips and under-the-table wages. I found a studio apartment in Queens, a tiny space with a view of a brick wall, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture came from street corners or thrift stores. The bed was just a mattress on the floor for 3 months until I could afford a frame. But when I lay there at night looking at my diploma on the wall, I felt richer than I'd ever been in my childhood bedroom. 3 years passed like pages in a book I was finally writing myself. Brennan and Associates became my training ground, each project teaching me something new about marketing, about business, about my own capabilities. I volunteered for everything, including the accounts. No one wanted the impossible deadlines, the difficult clients. My supervisor, Linda, said I worked like someone being chased. She wasn't wrong. I was running from the girl who'd been told she wasn't worth a Yale education toward a woman who would prove them wrong. The promotion to senior associate came after 18 months, unprecedented for someone my age. The raise let me move to a better apartment, one with actual sunlight and a kitchen that could fit more than one person. I bought real furniture piece by piece, a couch that wasn't from someone's curb, a dining table where I could spread out my work, a bed frame that didn't squeak. Each purchase felt like laying another brick in the foundation of my new life. David's restaurant had become my second home. He'd hired me as a consultant 20 hours a month, reviewing his expansion plans. But more than that, he'd become a mentor. He taught me about investment strategies, introduced me to his network, pushed me to think bigger than just surviving. When I mentioned wanting to start my own marketing firm, eventually he didn't laugh. He asked for a business plan. Emma and I stayed close, though she'd moved in with her boyfriend, and I had my own place. We had Tuesday night dinners, a standing date where we'd cook together and drink wine, and remember that winter when I'd shown up with nothing but a backpack and determination. She was the one who convinced me to start therapy to deal with the anger I'd compressed into ambition. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that success wasn't revenge, that building my life didn't have to be about proving anything to anyone but myself. The call came on a Thursday in August. Aunt Janet again, but this time her voice was different. Urgent. The family was in crisis. Dylan had gotten into serious trouble. Not drugs or violence, but debt. He'd been gambling online, convinced he could make quick money without working for it. $70,000 in debt to some very unforgiving people. He'd stolen from our parents, maxed out credit cards in their names, even taken a loan against the house without their knowledge. Dad had discovered it when the bank called about missed payments. His retirement savings were gone. Mom's too. The house was in foreclosure. Dad had lost his job the year before when his firm downsized, and at 58 he couldn't find another position that paid enough. Mom was working double shifts, but nursing didn't pay what it used to. They were living in Aunt Janet's basement now. Their entire life's work evaporated because they'd never been able to say no to their golden boy. She wasn't calling to guilt me, Janet insisted. She just thought I should know. The family was trying to help, but $70,000 was beyond what anyone could manage. Dylan had disappeared after the confrontation, probably hiding from the people he owed. Our parents were broken, she said. Not just financially, but spiritually. Everything they'd believed about their choices had been shattered. I sat with this information for 3 days. 3 days of Dr. Martinez asking what I wanted versus what I felt obligated to do. 3 days of Emma reminding me I owed them nothing. 3 days of David saying that sometimes the best revenge was simply living well. On the 4th day, I booked a flight to Ohio. We met at a Panera Bread near Aunt Janet's house. My parents looked like strangers. Dad had lost weight, his clothes hanging loose on a frame that used to carry such authority. Mom's hair was completely gray now, pulled back in a ponytail that emphasized the deep lines around her eyes. They both stood when I walked in, uncertain, like they didn't know if they were allowed to hug me. We didn't hug. We just sat down across from each other, 3 people who used to be a family. Mom spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. They were sorry. Not just sorry, but broken by the weight of understanding what they'd done. They could see it now, she said, all the times they'd chosen Dylan over me, all the opportunities they'd stolen, the achievements they'd dismissed, the love they'd made conditional. She cried as she talked, not the manipulative tears I remembered, but the raw grief of someone who'd lost everything, and finally understood why. Dad's hand shook as he pushed a folder across the table. Inside was every report card I'd ever gotten, every certificate, every newspaper clipping about my achievements. He'd kept them all hidden in his office. He'd been proud, he said, but too cowardly to show it, too afraid of upsetting the delicate balance they'd created around Dylan's needs. He saw now that the balance had always been an illusion, that they'd sacrificed their responsible child to enable their broken one. They weren't asking for money, they insisted. Weren't asking for forgiveness. They just wanted me to know that they finally understood. Dylan had taken everything, but worse, they'd given it to him freely while withholding it from me. They'd confused love with enabling support, with sacrifice of the child who'd never needed saving. Mom pulled out a letter she'd written, pages and pages of apologies and regrets. She didn't expect me to read it now or ever. She just needed to write it. The question hung between us, unspoken but heavy. Would I help them? Could I help them? I had money now. Not 70,000, but enough to make a difference. The promotion had come with a significant bonus. My consulting work with David was lucrative. The investment portfolio I'd started was growing. I could afford to be generous. The question was whether I wanted to be. I told them about my life in New York, about the nights serving coffee to investment bankers who now worked for me, about the studio apartment that had felt like a palace after Emma's couch, about graduating with honors while working 3 jobs, about the promotion Linda said I'd earned through sheer determination, about the business plan for my own firm, the life I was building, one careful decision at a time. They listened like they were hearing about a stranger, which I suppose they were. When I finished, I pulled out my own folder. Inside was a check for $30,000 and a contract. The money would pay off the most urgent debts, keep them from actual danger. But there were conditions. They had to attend family therapy together and separately. They had to cut Dylan off completely, no money, no enabling, no contact, until he got professional help for his gambling addiction. They had to sign a legal agreement that this was a one-time gift, not a loan, but also not an invitation to ask for more. The last condition was the hardest. We would have no relationship beyond this moment unless and until they could demonstrate real change. Not just apologies, but action. Not just regret, but growth. I would not return to being their daughter just to become their bank account. If they wanted me in their lives, they had to earn it by becoming people who could love both their children equally, even if one of those children could only be loved from a distance now. Dad signed immediately, tears streaming down his face. Mom held the pen for a long moment, reading the part about cutting Dylan off before signing with a shaking hand. They understood, she said. They'd already lost both children through their choices. At least this way they had a chance to maybe someday regain one. As I stood to leave, Mom reached for my hand. Not grabbing, just offering. I let her hold it for a moment. She said I'd become everything they'd never allowed themselves to see I could be. That the strength they'd tried to break had instead been forged into something unbreakable. That they were proud, even though they had no right to be. I squeezed her hand once, then let go. Some bridges once burned could maybe be rebuilt, but not today. Not yet. 7 years have passed since that Christmas Eve when I lost my family and found myself. I'm 32 now, CEO of my own marketing firm, with 12 employees and clients across 3 continents. The girl who once counted every dollar now signs contracts worth millions. The student who had to salvage her notes from beer-stained floors now gives lectures at universities about entrepreneurship and resilience. My office is on the 15th floor of a building in Manhattan, with windows that overlook the city I conquered, with nothing but determination. On my desk is a photo from my wedding 2 years ago. James is also a self-made success, someone who understands that love shouldn't require you to shrink yourself. Our daughter just turned 1, and when I look at her, I promise she'll never have to earn my love by being less than she is. Emma is my chief creative officer, because the best revenge really is success shared with those who supported you. David is on my board of advisors, still reviewing my business plans, but now as a proud mentor rather than a worried friend. Mrs. Chen from the Bushwick building sent flowers when we opened our second office. Marcus caters our company events, always joking about the girl who used to study financial projections while serving pancakes at 3 a.m. My parents and I have found a careful peace. They've been in therapy for 3 years now, individually and together. Dad volunteers at a financial literacy center, teaching young people how to avoid the mistakes he made with Dylan. Mom works with families dealing with addiction, sharing her story of enabling disguised as love. They've met James, held their granddaughter once, sent appropriate gifts for appropriate occasions. We have dinner together 4 times a year, always in public places, always with clear boundaries. Dylan resurfaced 2 years ago, clean for 6 months, working at a call center, living in a halfway house. He sent a letter through Aunt Janet, not asking for anything, just acknowledging what he'd taken. Not just money, but my childhood, my peace, my place in our family. He's in recovery for gambling addiction, he wrote, and part of that was recognizing the harm he'd caused. He didn't expect forgiveness. He just wanted me to know he finally understood what it cost me to be his sister. I haven't responded yet. Maybe I never will. Some wounds heal into scars you carry forever, reminders of what you survived. But I don't carry anger anymore. That girl who left in the snow with $347 and a backpack full of dreams, she won. Not because she proved them wrong, but because she proved herself right. She was worth the investment they wouldn't make. She was capable of the success they couldn't see. She was deserving of the love they couldn't give. My company does pro bono work now for young people aging out of foster care or escaping abusive families. We provide not just marketing services, but mentorship connections, proof that you can build a life from nothing but determination. When they ask how I know they can make it, I tell them about Christmas Eve in Ohio, about a bus ride to New York, about choosing yourself when no one else will. Last month, I gave the commencement speech at Ohio State. I stood at the podium where I should have been valedictorian looking out at hundreds of young faces preparing to launch into the world. I told them about the two kinds of family, the one you're born into and the one you build, about how sometimes losing everything is the only way to find out what you're really worth, about how the best apology is changed behavior, and the best revenge is a life well lived. After the speech, a young woman approached me. She was 21, about to graduate, and her family had just cut her off for refusing to give her college fund to her younger brother, who'd wrecked his third car. She wanted to know how I'd found the courage to leave, to start over, to believe I deserved better. I gave her my card, told her about a studio apartment in Queens that had just opened up, about a friend who was hiring at her design firm. Told her the secret I'd learned that Christmas Eve, that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when you're serving coffee at 4 a.m. It's about who celebrates your victories without making them about themselves. It's about who loves you not despite your strength, but because of it. Standing there in my cap and gown, the one I'd bought for myself this time, I realized something profound, that Christmas Eve wasn't the night I lost everything. It was the night I stopped accepting less than I deserved. It was the night I stopped apologizing for taking up space. It was the night I chose myself, and that choice led to every good thing that followed. Every Christmas Eve now I host dinner for anyone who needs a family for the night. Emma comes with her husband David, brings his partner Mrs. Chen, brings homemade dumplings. We gather people who've been discarded, overlooked, told they matter less. We feast and laugh, and nobody has to earn their place at the table. Nobody has to apologize for existing. Nobody's light gets dimmed so someone else can shine brighter. My daughter will grow up knowing her worth isn't negotiable, that love isn't supposed to hurt, that family shows up for your achievements, not just your failures, that she never has to make herself smaller to make someone else feel bigger. When she's older, I'll tell her about the aunt she's never met, the grandparents. She barely knows the Christmas Eve that changed everything. I'll teach her that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to apologize when you've done nothing wrong. The business continues to grow. We're opening a Los Angeles office next year, maybe London the year after. Each success feels like a vindication of that 22-year-old girl who walked through the snow to a Greyhound station. But more than that, each success is shared with the family. I chose the people who saw my worth when I couldn't afford groceries, who believed in my future when I was sleeping 3 hours a night, who loved me not for what I could give them, but for who I was becoming. Sometimes I drive past houses like the one I grew up in, two-story colonials with white fences and Christmas lights. I wonder about the children inside, whether they're loved equally, or whether one is being slowly erased to make room for another. I want to knock on doors and tell those forgotten children that there's a whole world waiting where they can be themselves fully and unapologetically, where their achievements will be celebrated, their boundaries respected, their worth unquestioned. That's the real gift from that Christmas Eve. Not just the life I built, but the knowledge that I deserve to build it. Not just the success, but the understanding that it was always mine to claim. Not just the family I chose, but the recognition that love shouldn't require you to disappear. Every morning when I wake up in my own bed, in my own home, living my own life, I remember that girl who refused to apologize. She saved us both. Every Christmas Eve, I remember the night I lost my family but found myself. And honestly, it was the best gift I never asked for. Do you have a similar story about standing up to family injustice? What would you have done in my situation? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about resilience, family, and finding your own path. Like this video if you believe everyone deserves to be valued equally in their family. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is no. Until next time, keep choosing yourself. Keep building your dreams, and never apologize for taking up space in this world.